So here are 4 steps that you can follow to integrate APIs in vanilla JavaScript. And the steps are quite simple and direct, and we'll be following them through. The first step that you need to make is you need to make an HTTP request, of course. And for you, before we even get into HTTP requests, for someone who does not understand what an API is, I'm going to just use an analogy here. You're at a restaurant and you want to make an order. So to make an order, you call the waiter or the waitress. They take your order. Then a few minutes later, you get what you ordered for. Now the waiter or the waitress, they are the one that are sort of an interface between you and whoever is preparing the food in the kitchen or wherever the food is. So the fact that they're the ones that use as a conduit of communication between you and what you want from the kitchen or wherever, or whatever place where they're getting the food from or whatever you're ordering, that makes them the API. So basically, an API is just an interface between you and whatever data that you want to get. Now, to get data from this API, you need to make a request. That's the first step. So you make a HTTP request. And to make an HTTP request in JavaScript, there are two ways that you can do this. You can use the fetch API, which is what we're going to be using primarily for this, but you can also use Axios. Axios is an external library that you can use. So for Axios, you have to install it first into your project, and then you can be able to use it. Yeah. And now, for the purpose of using the fetch API, we're going to be fetching data from the JSON placeholder API. For any sort of data that you want to use, or you're building an API and you just want to test out or you want to get sort of like dummy data for your project, the JSON placeholder API is a good one for you. It has dummy data that you can use. So, for example, if you want some basic to-dos there, if you want posts, comments, albums, there's all these types of data that you can see here, and these are the kind of requests, HTTP requests that you can make: get, post, put, patch, and delete. Anyway, getting back to us making requests, the first thing is making HTTP request, the fetch API, and we'll just move to Visual Studio Code here. So you send a fetch request. So this is going to send a request. You're sending a request to this specific API endpoint that is here. The response that you get when you're using the fetch API, this is one of the main differences between fetch and Axios. When you're using fetch, the data that you get back, you need to convert it to JSON, and then you can console.log that data, and that is what you're doing here. So we're basically converting the response or what you're getting to JSON, and down here now we're printing it. This is basically catching an error. Now, to confirm that this is making basically the request went through, we'll just run this project, this file. I call it data.js. And as you can see here, we're getting a response. User ID is 1, ID, this is the title, completed false. Anyway, you can basically try and print out everything to try and see the format for all this data. So first step is done, making a HTTP request. The next step that you can go through is adding a request option. So in some cases, you need to add some options to your request. So things such as headers or request body. And so you're going to need to do this for examples when you're making a post request or you're making a put request. And that is the second step. We're going to see an example on this. Then the next thing is handling your responses. Yeah. So this is the third step for handling your responses. Once you've received the response, in this example, we're using response to JSON to convert our response to a JSON object. Yeah. And that is what you're basically doing here. This is the first step, you're making a request. Then the second step is line 2 here, where you handle that response, in this case, converting it to a JSON object. And you move to now the other step, which is you go ahead and basically add error handling. Again, you can just combine this as step 2, that is handling the response and basically getting your data. Now, handling your errors is the last step that you follow. This is just to make sure that your application is robust and reliable. This will help you in cases where, let's say, you typed in the wrong, let's say you typed in maybe the wrong API endpoint, then it will catch the error immediately. Or maybe you're trying to access an endpoint that does not exist. Such kind of cases that arise there. So that is what error handling helps you with, just making sure that you basically get to understand if there's an error, right? Now, these are the examples here for making a post, basically just simple fetching data, handling the request, and then you can use catch here to basically catch your error. But there are other more complex ways that you can apply this. In terms of adding some query parameters to your get request, this is what you can use here. So an example that you can go and check out later on is when maybe you're building a web application and you want to use the Open Weather Map API. The Open Weather Map API, you can actually just go ahead and we can just open it here quickly. I do have a tutorial on that. It's but I think it's quite way below here. Let's check it quickly. So when you're making a request on that end, that is now when you're dealing with the JSON placeholder API, it's here. If you're dealing with the JSON placeholder API, you need to pass in certain parameters to your API endpoint, and this is it's what you're seeing here. So you can see here you have fetch. This is the API endpoint. Then you're passing in the location as one of the parameters here, and you're also passing in your API key at the end as one of the parameters. So that's the case that you're talking about here, where you have to add a query parameter to a get request. Yeah. Now, the other one is when you're making a post request. This is now the other step that I explained here, which is on adding request options. So if you're adding request options, this is a good example on this. So you're making a post request to the JSON placeholder API. So you're making a post request. These are the headers, the body. Basically, you have a title and all this. So to try and check this, we can just copy this code, and I'm going to make all this available for you to use. Okay, so I'm trying to, I think it's, yeah, just don't need this one for now. And we can just run the code. So when you run the code, you see this is we've already successfully made the post requests. Given the post has been given an ID of 101, and that is what you do. Basic. This is when you need to add some options here. So this is how you do it, and that's the syntax to follow. Yeah, and basically in a nutshell, that is how those are the four steps that you follow to make basically to handle API, rather to work with APIs in vanilla JavaScript. To just reiterate on this, the first thing you need to do is you need to make a request, a HTTP request. The second step is for you to handle the responses that you get, the response that you get. And the third step for you now is to go ahead and handle the errors that might come up. Yeah, and you can also use try and catch. You don't have to use just catch here. You can use try and catch to sort of like make it a bit more robust. And the other step is in cases where you need to add the options or you need to add certain parameters to your API endpoint. And yeah, with that you should be able to handle your, or rather integrate APIs onto your project or whatever that you're doing with it. Yeah, I'm going to make this link available in the description and the comment sections below. So check it out and happy coding.